Okay, good evening. If you just joined us for this webinar, which we're about to start in a couple of minutes, my name is Phil Badett. I'm joined by David Ollinger. We'll be introducing ourselves in a bit more detail in a few minutes' time, but thank you for joining us tonight. We're looking forward to taking you through some of the things that we've uncovered from using Canva and Microsoft's Copilot in terms of AI for student agency and student autonomy. We've got a few resources for you to access, and it's also going to be a practical session. So we're going to be asking you to try out some of the things that we've been talking about in the session today. So one of the things I would also say is that we're being quite brave in the sense that we are going to be doing some live AI demos. And so, as we know, AI can sometimes be a little bit unpredictable, so fingers crossed for the ride ahead. But we've hopefully got some really good use cases that you can take straight into the classroom. So this is AI for student autonomy. I just want to introduce myself. So I'm Phil Badham. I am Director at Learning Designer Pro, English teacher by trade, but have been working in the creative media space for quite a long time now, writing curriculum around digital media for people all over the world, basically. And I'm also a Visible Learning Plus consultant. And yeah, so that's me. Dave, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself as well. So Dave's joining me from O'Day High School.
Hey everybody, I'm from O'Day High School. I'm the Director of Digital Strategy. I've been in the classroom and in education for over 25 years. I'm a Microsoft Innovative Educator Fellow, and also a Showcase School Leader. And so Phil and I are real excited to show you about what we're learning with AI and Copilot and in Canva. So Phil, back to you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so what you'll need, well, we're going to be using two products today. We're going to be working in Canva. So hoping that you've got a Canva account, that you may have signed up for Canva, preferably one for education. But it doesn't matter, whatever Canva account that you've got really will be good for today's session. We've also got some, if you haven't already signed up for Canva for Edu, there's a sign up link there. When we're doing the Microsoft pieces, obviously you can access Microsoft via your Edge browser. If you're using your Edge browser today, you can use the Copilot symbol on the top right, and that should enable you to access Copilot. Or you can just type into your URL if you're using another browser, the web address that I've got at the bottom there, copilot.microsoft.com. So whatever browser you're using, you should be able to access Copilot AI. Dave's going to be answering some of any technical questions you've got as well as you're putting into the chat. If you're having any issues with the Canva access, obviously send them your email and we will send you a code for that as well. So before we begin, we need to sort of talk a little bit about where we're coming from. So although we're educators and although we're interested in AI, we are first and foremost in making sure that whatever use we have for AI or whatever use we have for any technology, that it's firmly grounded in evidence and it's firmly grounded in useful, practical ways of it working in the classroom and working for our students. So at Learning Designer Pro, we work with a range of different pedagogical frameworks, some of which I've listed here, and all of which we find particularly useful. But the one that we tend to focus most of our training courses around, because of its emphasis upon access and building agentic learners or learners that are particularly good at learning, Universal Design for Learning is our particular framework of choice for most of the courses that we run. And so what you'll find today is that as we move through the webinar, we'll be referring to those UDL design options, okay, which are called design options. And there are quite a few of them, and we are going to select them. So you'll often see these UDL numbers as we go through the sessions today. Now, we'll tell you what those UDL numbers represent in terms of the framework, Universal Design for Learning. But what it does is help you to see why the four things that we've chosen today to take through with you, why we've chosen them and why we think they're particularly pertinent for students. So what do we mean by student autonomy? And there are lots of different words to describe this concept of student autonomy. We can talk about independent learning. We can talk about learner agency. We can talk about learning, metacognition. We can talk about autotelic learning. There's also all sorts of different ways in which we describe the concept of your students or your learners being able to learn or understand how learning works. So it's not just something which is done to them by teachers. It's not something where they are sitting passively and assuming that someone else is going to give them what they need. They believe that they have attribution. They believe that they, as learners, have something to bring, that it's on them in terms of how they learn best. Now, Thomas says, fun question. Are your UDL numbers updated for the 3.0 framework? And the answer to that, Thomas, is absolutely yes, they are. In fact, I updated them yesterday in response to that. So they are absolutely 100% spot on. And feel free to test me on that as well. I guess I had them sitting right in front of me because I'm still getting used to the numbers, which I used to have off by heart and no longer do, which is a bit of a nuisance. But I'm going to rely on you to correct me if I do get anything wrong there. So please feel free to do so. It'd be quite fun. Now, if you're not familiar with Universal Design for Learning, essentially Universal Design for Learning options split into 3 points here: engagement, representation, action, and expression. So these are all the different ways in which learners are given multiple means of accessing these different things to become the sorts of learners that you can see on the slide there: purposeful, resourceful, strategic. Now, the 4 different ways that we're going to be using AI in this webinar are when learners need to be self-directed and goal-orientated. So in other words, how do we make sure that learners set their own goals? Because a lot of the learners that I work with are not very good at setting specific goals. And the other thing as well is, what strategies do learners have to get themselves out of trouble, or to get themselves out of at times in their learning where they get stuck, where the work is very hard and they need to push through and show a little bit of perseverance. And then we've got the ability for learners to be able to self-assess and reflect. This is really important because learners that can self-assess their own work tend to accelerate their learning significantly as a result, so the research says. And then, of course, we have the idea that learners don't just know how to learn, but they know how to optimize their learning and make sure their brain remembers more of what they need to remember for the tasks ahead of them. So these are the 4 areas that we're going to be looking at some use cases for AI as we go through. Again, if you've got any questions, pop them into the chat and I'll do my best to answer them. There'll be plenty of opportunities for discussion as well as we go through. So you're probably going to get about 5 or 10 minutes worth of demo per point here from using the different points of AI, and then we'll have a little chat and you'll have a little time to play a little bit with the AI and see what it comes up with for yourselves. Okay, so let's get moving forward. So the first one that we're going to be looking at is this idea of self-directed and goal-orientated learners. So we've got 2 UDL reference points here. We've got 6.1, and 6.1 is the idea that students set meaningful goals. And we've also got 8.1, which is about clarifying the meaning and purpose of goals. So making sure that students understand the goals that they've been set, so that teachers make sure that the students have clarity about their objectives, so that they have a better chance then of succeeding in the work that they're doing. And we're going to have a little look about how Canva's AI Magic Write might help a student who wants the AI to help them refine and produce some of the goals for them. And it also gives us a chance to have a look at some of Canva's great AI features. And we're going to be looking at several of those in this next bit. So I'm just going to drop out of this slide deck for a moment, and then we're going to go into this document that I've got ready with me. I just want you to imagine in this first instance that we have a student who's been studying, a K-12 student who's been studying geothermal springs in their geography lessons. And they're going to be doing a topic review. They've maybe got an assessment coming up, they've got an exam or something coming up where they need to understand this. Now, one of the things that we want students to be able to do is, with students that have autonomy, is that they need to be able to use the tools at their disposal correctly. So none of what we're saying here assumes that the student has the knowledge to be able to just whack out prompts exactly as they need to be. Teachers have a role in making sure that the learner understands the way in which to query the AI. So they have to be taught the same sort of skills that you might teach a student if they were learning any other, complex engine like Google or whatever. Let's have a start with this and let's have a look at this. So I'm in the Canva doc at the moment. So I've created a doc and I've just put a little picture of a geothermal spring there. Now, this is a student. I might be thinking to myself, right, a student who's goal directed is very much interested in setting goals, targets, and always looking at the next steps ahead of them. Okay, we train students to be interested in the process of learning rather than just have we finished, what's next. So it's about next step. It's about understanding what it is that we need to do, is setting goals and targets so we can achieve them. So let's see what happens when we query so I'm in the doc here, and if you're working in a Canva doc and you've sort of clicked on and here with my cursor, you'll notice that at the top in the toolbar, we've got Magic Write, and this is where we begin our journey querying the Canva AI. So I'm just going to click on Magic Write, and immediately we've got a prompt up here. It says use 5 1 words to describe what you want to write. Now that prompt from Canva AI is quite interesting because it sort of almost assumes that we want the AI to do the work for us. And I think it's quite important to say to students at this point, it's not, you can ask it anything that you like. You don't have to just ask it to generate content for you. In this case, I'm going to treat it a little bit like, as Dave said there, how you might use OpenAI. So what I'm going to do is just maybe put in a prompt that a student might start with, where they're sort of telling the Magic, I'm studying the topic of geothermal springs and I have a test coming up. Give me 3 goals to help me ensure I have a deep knowledge of the topic. And this is really important as well, because the student that's got learner agency understands the need not just to be given surface knowledge, but the need to deepen their knowledge behind it as well. So again, everything that we cover here in terms of prompting, there's a teacher behind the student who's essentially trained them to become aware of the way in which learning works in the best way. And I'm just going to click on generate, and we'll see what it generates here. So Canva's AI, Magic Write, will then generate 3 quite long-winded goals for me. And we probably don't recognize these as goals per se. They're more like just some general chunks of information. It does tell us what we might do in order to achieve better in the exam, but it's not exactly in a particularly great way for us to understand. So I'm just going to insert that into my document and then take out some of the fluff at the beginning and at the end. So the important thing is now is that a learner who's got autonomy needs to break this content down. And at this point, this is where Magic Write has something which we call custom prompt. Now, custom prompts within Canva's AI means that you can actually prompt the response that you got in the previous bit. So when we asked it about giving us 3 goals about the topic of geothermal springs, it's given us this information, and then we can drill that information down further using the Magic Write custom prompt. Now to do that, we'll need to select the content here, 1, 2, and 3, and then I'm just going to go back to the Magic Write, and then you'll see that there is now a new addition to that submenu called custom prompt, and that means that I can now prompt the response I have from the previous prompt with something a little bit more refined, a little bit more specific. So I'm just going to click on custom prompt, and then I'm going to ask it to shorten these descriptions and turn them into a series of bulleted items. And now essentially what it's done is it's taken the content and it's broken it down even further. And it's really important that I do that using the custom prompt, because if I took it back up to Magic Write, it would start a new topic essentially. So what I'm doing here is I'm customizing and I'm refining the original information that I got back from the first prompt that I made. So I could then either replace it or add it below. I'm just going to replace it there for the moment. But what I could then do again, I can think about, right, let's have a think about what I might do in terms of tabular form. So I might want to make this a little bit more goal centric. So what I'm going to do is this time I'm going to use a custom prompt again, using that information I've highlighted. And this time I'm going to ask it to put it in a tabular form with a second column where I can tick if it's completed. So these are very specific prompts, and I'm not using Magic Write just to generate content. Okay, so I'm just going to generate that and put that in. So here you go. You can see there that I've then put that in, and it's now turned into a tabular set of targets that I can then tick to being completed. That shows you how I might use custom prompts to really refine down and generate some sort of goal setting template for me. But there are some other quite cool things that we can do as well. So I'm actually going to go back a few steps to my original set of 3 rather long-winded goals. I just did a Control-Z, just went back in time. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this and do another custom prompt, but this time I'm going to ask them to make the targets smart targets. So specific, measurable, okay, and attainable, realistic, and time specific. Okay, and you can see there then that for a student that wants a little bit more structure to the goals and targets that they've created, this is what they have now generated. So I'm going to add that below, and we now have quite a detailed document with my specific SMART targets represented here. What you could do, if you think about this, is that students can use this to generate their own goals. But it's also something that teachers can also help students to do, to show them how to generate their own goals too. The important thing about this is I find that when students set their own goals, they're often not specific. They often find it a very difficult thing to do. And just by doing it using the magic right here, what we can actually say is, okay, you generate some goals, go back through these, which ones are pertinent, which ones are relevant. They've got something that they can mangle, got something that they can adjust and re-edit, as opposed to coming up from scratch. And then the final thing I'm going to do is show you a little bit of AI magic from Canva, which isn't necessarily that well known, is I've got this new document. Why don't I turn it into a document that's more geared towards being a planner or a goal target tracker? So I'm going to go up to the top here to where it says magic switch, and I'm going to click on transform. And I'm going to transfer, it says, what do you want to transform it into? And I'm going to put a goal planner. And then it's going to take the content of that document that I produced and it's going to make it into something that we might be more likely consider to be a goal planning document in its own right. So we give it a little bit of time and read the lovely quote while we're waiting, and hopefully it won't take too long. There it is. It's created a new doc. Let's have a look at it, see if it's any good. And look, it's put it into this lovely for us. It's taken out all the fluff. And this is in Canva, Dr. Sonia. Yeah, so this is Canva's magic switch there. And it's now put that all into the goal and the SMART targets. And it's even kept my picture at the bottom there. But you can see it's done a really great job of just sorting all this out for me. So Donna said, did you use the SMART goal to go into the goal planner, or will it do it with text? So yeah, so all I did, if we go back to my original document here, is I prompted it. I prompted it to give me SMART targets. And then when I magic switched it, all it's done is basically take that content and it's put it into a much more usable, readable format for me. So you can see just how bad, and from then I can carry on. You see, I don't have to stop here. I can then say, right, brilliant, turn that into a tabular template for me. Okay, so I could say organize these targets in tabular form with my magic right, and just keep custom prompting it until I get exactly what I want. Boom. So that is magic right. So just to remind you what we did there, we started out with very little. In fact, we started out with nothing except a picture. And we started out with just asking the magic right to, I told it the topic I was studying and I had a test coming up, give me 3 goals to help me ensure I have a deep knowledge of the topic. Now, Dave has shared with you the document that I'm using with my prompts on it. So if you want to try, you can carry along with me. But just for the next 5 minutes, what I would like you to do is have a go with Magic Write in Canva. So you'll need to, first of all, set up a doc in Canva. So go to Create Design, select Doc. And then when you're in the doc, have a go at choosing a topic that you'll be teaching and query Magic Write from the perspective of a student looking for goal setting. So again, you can use our Word document as a guide if you want to use my exact prompt. And then once you get your information back, have a play with it. Use the custom prompts to break them down into descriptions and bulleted items, put them into tabular form. Have a play with it. Ask us any questions if you want to, and we'll do a quick demo if you'd like me to go through anything again. And then there's a few questions to think about what you're coming up with and how it might be useful for you. Okay. Thanks, Dr. Sonia. Right, so 5 minutes just to have a little play with that. We'll be around. I'll be able to help and advise and maybe take you through any bits that you've missed again, if you'd like me to. But I'm just going to put the timer on for 5 minutes and then we'll rejoin and yeah, just tell us what you've discovered and what you think so far.
Phil, something I find really compelling about this model is how the underlying assumptions, I think, of how students are using artificial intelligence is to do the work for them.
Yeah.
And here I find this route, especially if we can really coach students to go down this route, is it gives students the opportunity to use AI to direct them, to focus them, to offer them more challenge. And it's, I think, a new way of looking at it, in a way that I think lots of educators might see this more of an assistant as opposed to a threat to doing their work.
Absolutely. I think we need to think about where AI can become I'd say the third teacher, because I always see the classroom, the physical environment of the classroom as the second teacher. Um, AI can become part of the third teacher, if you like, or the assistant. And we'll see other ways in which it can be used as an assistive technology, which is, of course, another UDL design option: optimize access to accessible materials and assistive and accessible technologies and tools. 4.2. So there, and that's part of this whole block of designing multiple means of action expression. So the different ways in which learners act, the different way learners behave and what they reach for. It's about training learners away from this idea of learned helplessness, where they'll just stick their hands up and ask the teacher. So what we're trying to do is to say, what have you got available to you? And there are lots of different things. So one of the questions that I've got here is, in one of the is when would you trigger the use of AI for the student? When is it available to them? There's a couple of other cool ways I'll show you afterwards about how we might use the AI to present us with goals and present us with information. But we'll give everyone a bit of a chance to in the next couple of minutes to have a little bit of a play. So it we ask students to cite their sources and also how to know if information is reliable. That's really good. How does the information given by Magic AI, Write and AI fall into that? Well, I think it's with this particular instance, and I've chosen goal setting specifically for this, is that what we would hope students would do, and what I would hope that they would do, is be able to sort of feed it more specific information about what the teacher needs them to learn for geothermal springs. So they might have a topic coming up, and hopefully, because they've done the work or they've been in the class for any particular time, they're doing goal setting as opposed to finding out something new. So in this case, what we're asking the students to do is to choose the pertinent goals about the topics that they know less about, and then choose those goals away from the other ones. So the learner here is having to basically be discriminate between the things that aren't that relevant to them, the things that they do and don't know. Now, when it comes to generating new content, which is what we'll see in Copilot, you'll see that Copilot gives you the sources. So it's coming from specific sources which are reliable. But I'm just going to show you another couple of cool things with the AI, which I think are quite important. And this is, I'm going to ask Magic Write to write down the 3 most common mistakes or misconceptions high school students make when learning about geothermal springs. These could be things like confusion around terminology or not understanding key processes, for instance. Present it with a mistake first and then provide the correction underneath. It's going to hit generate. So it's generated 3 mistakes. Again, there's quite a lot here. So what I might want to do is refine that prompt down a little bit and say present it with a mistake first, then you provide the correction underneath as single sentences so we don't get too much information. Here we go, that's better. I'm going to go to the plus button on the left hand side, and I'm going to move down to where it says highlight blocks, and then I'm going to choose warning, and I'm going to take my mistake up here, just paste that in as my warning, and then underneath I'm going to put in my correction. And this is just a nice way in a doc of throwing up some of the misconceptions that students might have about the particular topic that they're studying. And this is quite a nice way of separating out different pieces of content in your doc. And you can do that with there's hazard warnings, there's errors, there's all sorts of different things, but it's quite a nice way of getting students to see bits that might trip them up in the exam. So Alberto says, I think the more than cite the sources this text is created with an LLM would be interesting to motivate our students to share the prompt, why they use them and how they check the data. Absolutely. And I think all of that, Alberto, is feeding into this idea of helping students to understand the process of what it is that they're doing and how they know that that's all helpful. And it's all part of that reflection on their own behaviors, their own learning, and about the content that they receive. And it makes them much more better at that sort of critical thinking too, regardless of the source, whether it's an LLM, a teacher, a student. So it's that sort of cross-checking, isn't it, of data, which is so important. So what are we going to look at next? So this time, I'm actually now going to be looking at Microsoft Copilot as an alternative use of AI. And this time I'm going to be looking at using the Copilot AI as a support system. And this is linking in with the UDL 9.2, which is developing awareness of self and others, and also UDL 4.2, which is about optimizing access to assistive and accessible technologies. And the whole point of this is what strategies students use when they lose flow, or when they get stuck, or when they find themselves in a learning rut and they can't get out of it. And those situations might be where they're not just in school, but they might be at home working on some particularly difficult work. How might the AI prod them or prompt them out of the situations that they're in order for them to develop their own interpretation, their own thoughts? And this is always a bit of a difficult area, isn't it? Because it's the idea of how much does AI assist before it becomes, it becomes detrimental to the learner's learning, and to what extent does AI help the learners to get back into their learning by being able to push them over the hump of the hill in the same way that we might use teacher support or any other type of support. Now, the best way to think about this is to already start to think about the ways in which we already get students unstuck. So to what extent do we have things in the classroom? You could use 3Bs before me, Brain, Book, Buddy, Boss, whatever it is, routines that you want students to use to stop them coming straight to you, but you want them to be able to self-support. And AI becomes one of those tools that are accessible to them. So I want to give you just a sense of what Copilot can do, but at no point am I saying that you would take Copilot to this length in terms of how it might support a student through an entire activity. So I'm just going to pop up Copilot on my screen here. We're going to start off with the Copilot space. Now, it's asking me to choose a conversation style, and this will actually come in quite importantly in a little while. So I tend to use balanced. Creative tends to go off on some quite incredible tangents sometimes, and precise can sometimes be too precise, if you like, or too concise for my needs. So I'm going to stick to the balanced chat mode here. I'm then going to give it a prompt. And what I want you to imagine is I've got a student who is studying drama, because there are lots of times when I've been doing AI sessions when drama never gets a look in, theatre arts never gets a look in. Everyone's using it for science, English, math, whatever, but no one's thought about how AI might be used to support a theatre arts student. In actual fact, AI has got an awful lot to offer in this particular scenario. So I want you to imagine that you're a student and you're studying the Crucible in your drama class, and they're looking at the scene, Act 2, Scene 1, which if you don't know the Crucible, it's set in Puritan USA, and it's during the witch trial, the Salem witch trials. It shows John Proctor, who is a farmer, and his wife Elizabeth. And John Proctor has had an affair of which the wife knows about, and their relationship is very tense at this point. And a lot happens in the scene, and they talk to each other about not a lot really, but there's a lot going on underneath the surface. And it's quite a difficult scene to perform. And I'm imagining that if a student had been given this scene and they need to think about how it could be interpreted, they might find it quite difficult to find that themselves. So I'm going to ask the AI here, they're stuck essentially. So I need to think of different ways the scene can be performed. What should I be looking for? Let's see what it comes back with. So we've got 4 different things that have come back down here. It's got about the tension, about the tense conversation, talks a little bit about body language and tone. Doesn't give them the answers, just tells them to explore how their body language can convey that. It talks a little bit more about how words mask their true feelings, and about Elizabeth's forgiveness. Okay, so it says the scene's power lies in what remains unspoken, the emotional subtext. What I'm going to do is just imagine that the student has remembered that the teacher said subtexting was a good way to explore the dialogue. And now what they're going to ask Copilot is, okay, can you create a table showing me the speaking dialogue and what the student, what the actors or what the characters might be actually really thinking, so I can get a sense of what these characters are doing. Now, if you look just above that, what Copilot does, which Magic Write doesn't do, is it gives you the principal sources of its original response. So when we talked a little bit about, how do we know the quality of the AI's response, we're actually being given an indication of those 3, and we can link to it as well. Okay, so I'll just post that prompt in for you, Michael. Okay, so there you can see that the student is being very chatty with the AI here. It's sort of treating it as though it's a friend. but it's also prompting me to think about how I might follow up this question. So Copilot's already thinking, well, how might you want to explore this further? Do you want to go down John's route of portraying that in a conflict? Do you want me to summarize the events leading up to it, which would be about activating prior knowledge of the scene? What are some creative staging ideas for this scene? It's actually anticipating something I'm going to ask it a little bit later on. But as I said, just imagine the student has seen that word subtext and gone, ah, yeah, I remember the teacher using that terminology. Let's see what it does. Now, what we're asking the AI to do here is to think. We're asking it to actually think about what the character has said in the dialogue and then what the character might actually mean. So this is a more sort of complex query of the AI. So hopefully it will do the job for me and it won't take too long about it on the screen here. Here we go. So obviously heard me. We've got a little bit of subtext there from some of the content. Okay, so it's well seasoned. She's Prox is talking about the stew here, and the inner thoughts of John here is that John is thinking, I'm trying to please you, Elizabeth, trying to say the right things, even though he's actually just chucked a bit more seasoning into the pot in order to make it more palatable for him to eat. So even though he's seasoned it, he's then telling her that it's a good seasoned stew. So we know what the inner thoughts are, and it's actually been put into the first person. So this is really good. This is a really great way of the student sort of getting a little bit more of a push, a little bit more of an instinct about what the characters mean when they're saying what they mean. So John, she's only gone this 7 months, is actually a much more specific thing she's trying to, which is I forbid her to go. Okay, I forbid Mary Warren to go there. She's not to go, but she doesn't say it directly. She says it indirectly. Now, as Bill says there, I like the export to Excel capacity. There are a few export options available to us here. We can export to Word, PDF, to text there. And you can see there's that edit in Excel button. So you can take that table straight into, and you can actually put the rest of the scene in there as well for you. So lots of really great ways in which Copilot gives us additional information rather than just the standard responses. So where do we go from here? Well, what if I'm a little bit confused? So that's been great. That's really helped me out. But the teacher has confused me and has told me that actually the ways in which you say these lines really depend on the dynamic of the relationship between the two characters. So, it depends on whether John is the dominant one in a relationship or whether it's Elizabeth, and whether they feel that their marriage is salvageable or not. And then they've got one particular line, which is, I mean to please you, Elizabeth. And the student is thinking, well, how might I say that line? What sort of options do I have? So I'm going to put this in. When it comes to playing the scene, my teacher said it depends which of the characters. How would that line be said? And again, the AI is going to give some prompts as to what that might be. Okay. And it says, right, tone of resignation, even bitterness. Subtext will convey that he's going through the motions, trying to keep up appearances. So this is really, really helpful dialogue. If you're a student doing this and you're thinking about different ways of saying it, you might take that and you might do it verbatim, but chances are you'll be thinking, yeah, that's a good way. I'll try it out. I'll try this out. Maybe I like this a little bit better. What I then want to do is think, okay, so what we've done a very sort of text heavy use of AI here. And what I've done is show you a dialogue. This is more than the refinement that we saw with Canva. With Canva, we were trying to wrestle down some content into a much more palatable, manageable form. Now we're having more of a conversation with the AI. Now we're asking it for guidance. We're asking it for advice, but it can't do the drama work for us. We still have to say the lines. We still have to choose the way in which we act. What I'm then going to do is think about, okay, well, what sort of, I'll open it out. I mean, Dave, what would you want to know now if you were putting on a performance of the Crucible? What other sort of information might you need if you hadn't, for instance, studied anything to do with Puritanism or 17th century America?
Well, we're going to need to stage it. Where everyone's going to stand, maybe what our backgrounds should look like. If there's some quick
Yep.
props I might be able to get as a young person, or have to go out and purchase some things, what would that look like? I think
Cool.
that would be the next thing. I mean, short of watching the video or watching a performance of it, but to be able to talk with my team and decide on what that's going to look like.
Right, so you're going to be doing this in conjunction with other people. You're going to be doing group work. They've all got, different roles and things. So, I could start think about, well, what about the prosemics here? So how might this sit? What might they look like? And I might put in a prompt a little bit like the one I've put in there to give me a sort of sense of the visual. So here we go. So there we go. I've got some really nice ideas now for trying to create the Copilot there. And we've got a lovely image that might help us with our staging as well. Now that's giving us a nice image, but it might not really give me anything that's specifically for the theatre. So let's try and do something a little bit more helpful in terms of a stage set design by being very specific about it. What I would like you to do is we're going to go back to our presentation, and I'd just like you to have a little think about this time. Not so much, I mean, you can try Copilot in terms of, but think about where your students most might naturally get stuck. What routines and strategies do they have access to that might help them get unstuck? And when, to what extent would you give students access to AI to get them unstuck? So what sort of points would you actually allow your students access to be able to use the AI to push them and move them forward, something like we've just discussed there? And how could you ensure students know how to get answers that are useful and accurate? So I'm just going to give you 5 minutes to have a little think about that and maybe put some of your thoughts into the chat as well. Okay, so I'll give you a little bit more than 5 minutes, but it's just to have a little bit explore of that one. We'll move on. And so I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on the next bit because I want to get on to the last bit, and we've got about 40 minutes left. But the third one is about thinking about how students can self-assess and reflect. And what we want students to be able to do is to understand their level of progress, not just which grade they have or what the teachers told them they've got, but do they understand how much progress they're making in their own work? Now, when students use this idea of comparing current work with previous work in order to gauge progress and assessment, we call this ipsative assessment. And it's actually something that AI can be really, really helpful with when we're asking it to coach us and help us to understand how much progress we may have made between two sets of things. So I want you to imagine, for instance, that you've been doing a piece of narrative writing. Perhaps you wrote one last year, and perhaps you've tried doing it again this year after putting into play all of the feedback that you've had from the teacher. So the prompt that I'm going to give it is this one. I'm just going to say, I'm going to show you two pieces of narrative writing. It's important that we're on balanced or precise for this one. I wrote the first one in 2023 and the second one I wrote yesterday. Can you compare the two extracts of the same story introduction? Tell me if I've made progress in my writing and which one is better and why. So it should then prompt me. As I said, it's live use of AI. So, we've already seen it can sometimes not always do what we told, but let's give it the first extract. So first extract, and then it should prompt me after giving it a little bit of an analysis for a second one. So all of this is on the document that Dave shared with you. And okay, so it says second extract. So let's put the second one in. So now it's going to run a comparison between the first extract and the second extract. And it's going to tell me that it feels like the second extract is better. Okay, so it says it shows improvements in several areas, including emotional depth and descriptive writing. It tells me that the dialogue is more natural and authentic. And it's also given me some follow-up for it to either thank it and leave it there, or you can give it some more of the writing. What if I actually say to it that I don't think its answer is correct? What if I say to it, I don't think that the second one is that much better? Why are you so sure? Okay, so it does say it's subjective, but it does give us some sort of reevaluation there of the two extracts in itself. What I could then do if I'm looking for some sort of progress and what could I do next? Or how could I improve the extract, the story next time? And so we get some really useful points here. We've got some conventional ones that you would give to any narrative writer: show, don't tell. Thinking about there's an absence of internal monologue. ramping up the descriptive language in terms of vocabulary, and also asking some very specific questions about the dialogue. Explore family dynamics further. How did Jake's parents react to his resistance? So these are very, very specific points. And if you do any sort of writing, fictional or non-fictional, having AI as a critical friend next to you can be absolutely game-changing for you as a particular writer. If you are a writer who's always been accused of being too florid, the AI will help you to understand how to produce better pacing, how to remove unnecessary grammar and that sort of thing. So one of the things that we can see here is that with Copilot particularly, is that we've got some really great ways of helping us to understand differences between texts. We can query it, we can ask it for evidence, and it can sometimes be quite stubborn. It will say, no, I genuinely believe that this is the better piece of writing. If the two pieces of writing are quite close together, you might get a little bit more subjectivity. Or you can, so AI is a critical friend, you can also give it something, you can give it a more specific rubric. So I could add in a rubric here and say, now mark it or grade it against the rubric that I've given you. And we can feed that in as a file and then get the AI to then see it in a different lens. So this is one of the powerful things about with AI, is that a student that has autonomy understands that the AI will give it one answer. But a student who's got real independent learning capabilities and understands the agency of the learner will say, now look at it through this lens, look at it through this lens, and it will put different lenses in front of the AI in order to get a multitude of rich feedback back from the AI, as well as feed forward as well coming from it too. And then for the final bit of the session, I'm going to come to this bit here. So the last part that we're going to be focusing on is this idea of optimizing their learning. So this is when students can optimize their own learning. And by optimize, what we mean is they understand how learning works and they understand how to make sure that learning is memorable and they retain learning. So I'm using here the idea of Sweller's definition of learning, which is learning is a change in long-term memory. On that basis, how do we make sure that learning isn't just there on the surface, but is actually deep knowledge? And I'm using this pyramid here to sort of show the movement of knowledge in the student. And a lot of this comes from a lot of the work of John Hattie, okay, visible learning. And it's the idea that learning is the process of moving from surface knowledge to more deeper understanding and then to what we call transfer. So what do we mean by surface, deep, and transfer? Well, surface learning is understanding facts that I can recall, but I may not understand how deeply facts are related to each other. So for instance, I might understand the 5 key pieces of information about the beginning and the end of the American Civil War, for instance. I might understand that, but I don't necessarily understand cause and effect. I don't understand how they all fit together. I don't understand necessarily how this connects with this, connects with this. And so what you would do, deeper learning is when we get the opportunity to connect our knowledge together. So we would take, if we were doing the Cold War, for instance, we would take a topic like the Bay of Pigs, and we would take a U-2 spy plane, we would take Khrushchev, and we would find something that connects those things together. Now, this is the hard work. This is the deep work that humans do as learners, but it's also something that AI can do very, very well itself for us. And what it can also do is help us to transfer our learning into other domains too. Now, transfer of learning is when we take our skills and knowledge and we throw it into a new context or a new situation to see how it changes and how it's affected. We have what we call near transfer, which is when we take that knowledge into a similar situation in a similar domain. Or we have what we call far transfer, where we compare our knowledge of the Cold War, let's say, to heavy metal music, right? That would be what we call far transfer. So when we take something that's very disparate and we make connections to it to make it simpler. And if you think about it, all the best teachers that have ever lived and breathed have done this thing they call transfer, whether it's Aesop's fables, whether it's the parables, whether it's Stephen Hawking talking about the metaphor of the teacup to describe entropy in a brief history of time, whatever it is that you're looking at, great teachers are able to take complex concepts and find a way of explaining them through metaphor or through some other analogy. And that's what expert learners can do. That's what learners who have learned something deeply get the opportunity to do. So how might AI help us in that situation? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flash back up Magic Write, and we're going to have a look at how Magic Write might support us for deeper learning. Okay, so let's come out and let's go back into my Canva workspace. And this time I'm just going to start a new file. I'm just going to create a design and choose doc and start with a blank page completely. Let's start first of all by thinking about the different things that we talked about with the UDL. So one of the UDL design options is called Maximize Transfer and Generalization. It's 3.4. And generalization is another learner skill, which is about taking something and making it simpler so that we remember it better. So for instance, if I've just been learning about solids, gases, and liquids in science, I might use the prompt, explain the differences between solids, gases, and liquids in a straightforward way, give examples. A very straightforward and simple prompt. And then you can see it's given me some information there about solids, gases, and liquids. Okay, and it's quite useful, but it's a little bit wordy. It's not necessarily going to help me to remember it at the same level. Okay, so remember, I'm trying to make learning easier, and this might not necessarily have made it that much more palatable for me. So how can I make help the AI help me to make this learning more memorable and more easy to understand? What I need to do is take the concept of solids, liquids, and gases and give me a way of understanding them by using something like file transfer so I can really quickly grasp the nettle of what this is. And this is what I think AI does really well, which human beings, unless they're super creative, find it more difficult to do. Magic Write prompt. Could you make this clearer by comparing each of those states of matter with a superhero? So what it will then do is it will take the concepts of solids, liquids, and gases, and it will find those analogs for you. So it's saying that the Hulk is like solids, and it tells me why. It has a definite shape and volume, packed together slightly, is denser. Think of it sort of like the Hulk standing on his ground and yielding and powerful. So it asked me to imagine the Hulk, and it asked me to relate the characteristics of solids to that character, right? Then we've got liquid as well, which is Aquaman, and gas is the Flash, because we want to think about something moving extremely fast. So fast you can barely see it. It's like a puff of smoke. Picture the Flash zipping through the air, covering vast distances in the blink of an eye. That's the rapid movement and expansiveness of a gas. Okay, so here are some of the ways in which the AI can help us to remember things. And it's not doing the learning for us, but what it is doing for us is helping us to remember it better. And it is helping us to understand these different ways of doing it. Let's come up with another one of file transfer. This time, I'm going to ask it to compare things to children's toys. Can you come up with an easy way for me to remember the key differences between the Triassic and Jurassic eras by using an acronym based on children's toys? Now, a good learner will understand that mnemonics, acronyms, all those sorts of things are really great ways of helping us to remember, but we're taking out the need for them to go and create those acronyms when all they need to do is to use the acronyms to learn the content, right? So we're accelerating that process for them. So here's the prompt I'm using, and here's what it generates. So it's got Lego. Now, what I can then do, because this is really, really helpful, Lego is going to help me to understand those different parts of the Triassic and Jurassic era. So I'm going to insert that into my document, and then I'm going to think, right, this is really helpful. I've got Lego, and Lego is helping me to understand the different characteristics of these eras. What could I else do to make my learning really, really stick? Well, let's go into the elements section of Canva. Let's go into generate your own, and let's say create an image of a dinosaur made of colorful children's bricks. Can't use Lego because it won't let me. Trademark. So, but let's see what it says and what it comes back with. I'm just going to take this, I'm going to park it right there. Okay, and there we go. I've now got a great way, not just to remembering the content using Lego, but I've actually now got a visual referent as well. I'm using the different parts of the Canva AI in order to generate these very crazy images, but am I going to remember them? Oh my gosh, yes, I'm going to remember them. Okay. Now, we've also talked about AI being maybe blocked at a district level, at a school level. That doesn't necessarily mean that students won't be at home. And when we talk about student autonomy, what we're hoping the students will do is to use AI in the right ways if they're using it at home where they do have access to it, whatever LLM they're using, whatever product they're using, they will have access to these tools. So rather we sort of help them to understand, first of all, how learning works, because once they've got that, once we've taught that, we then just apply those learning skills and strategies onto the use of AI. And we give AI a context then. We're not just saying use AI for this, but we're saying you've got learning strategies. This is how AI fits into those learning strategies. You might do this in lots of different ways, but AI is just one of the tools that you've got at your disposal for all the things that you already do use when you're trying to learn things. And the last thing I'm going to do is think another way about how I might learn things, which is to reprocess it in different forms. Let's carry on down here. And this time I'm going to prompt the AI, give me some cause for vocabulary as bullet points. Now this prompt worked earlier, so let's just pop this in instead. There we go. Anyway, let's insert that for now. And then what I'm going to do, I'm just going to highlight this. And I'm going to come out of Canva for a second, go back into my recent designs. And this time I'm going to bring up, actually, I'll just type it into my templates up here. So fishbone diagrams. So I'm just going to pick this one up here. And here we go. I've already got one there for climate change. And I'm just going to add myself a new page. Take this out. And I'm just going to park the information that I got from my AI. And what I would then say to the student is, right, you've got lots of different causes and effects here in the AI I've generated. Now I want you to reprocess that information into this fishbone diagram. So I want you to take that information, collapse it down, and put in those causes and effects into that diagram for us. Okay? But the point here is that whatever content that you've got, you're now being asked to then reprocess it, pull it down, put it into a fishbone diagram where you're organizing knowledge, you're organizing it into a new form. And it's through that process of organization that students learn the content better. Because when you think about what they're doing here is that they're connecting different things together. Why is that more far advanced than that one? Why is that a sub option of that one? Why is this environment one? You know, I can change all of these. I could put in carbon here or something like that, and then I could put some sub issues underneath. And it's a really great way that students can organize their information. You'll find in Canva, there are lots of graphic organizers, lots of way of visually separating out, collecting, putting together, systematizing the knowledge that the students have. So what I'd like you to do in the last 5-10 minutes or so, I'm just going to give you a little bit of time to have a little think about asking Canva to create connections to make content more memorable. Okay, it's very good at doing these creative comparisons and analogies. So see how you get on with that. Have a little play with it and see if you can get some really great connections with some weird and wonderful things. So it might be a topic that you're currently teaching. In what ways can you get it to come up with some great analogies that might be helpful for your students? Because this isn't just something for students as well. It might help you as a teacher to make concepts more memorable for them when you're teaching it. Okay, particularly if you're teaching younger grade students too. So it gives them something to hook their ideas onto. Anyway, I'm going to give you 5 to 10 minutes to have a little think about that, and then we'll just do a little lead out for the session today, picking up on what we've done and telling you a little bit more about what else is available within this series. Please feel free at this point, of course, to not just have a play, but also to ask any questions or raise any thoughts that you have about this topic. You know, AI, still to a certain extent, we're still feeling our way through this new world. And it's about sort of tempering the excitement with the practical. But for me, it's more about thinking, well, in an ideal world, what sort of things will students be doing with it?
Hey, Phil. This has been so cool watching you work in Canva. I've just been kind of dipping my toes into image generation, and I find that like the prompt engineering is a lot different from text-based. Do you have any advice on like, or any standard, like any like styles you use with image generation that are effective and yeah. I've just noticed they're different. I'm still really sucking at images. So any help you can give, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So one thing that I've always found is that and this is actually something that there's 2 things really. First one came up in a Microsoft session at ISTE, which was the image generation tip was to use an adjective, a noun, a verb, and a style. So for instance, draw a 3D letter B on a blue background with fuzzy texture. So adjective, noun, verb, and style, particularly the style. So if you can be very specific about the style that you want, and it could be papier-mâché, or it could be oil pastel, or it could be in the style of a cubist image or something like that. If you're very specific about this, the AI, the generative image tends to be a much more close to what you want it to be. I think someone said to me it's like garbage in, garbage out. If you don't give the AI enough in terms of what to grab hold of, so there are these little sort of things that happen when we're not specific. So yeah, that one about noun, adjective, style, and verb, I think is really, really important. So you could give that a go. That was the one that
Oh
really,
yeah.
really helped me. Yeah.
I like the formulaic approach to it.
Okay, so if you've had a little chance so far to have a little play, what sort of connections have you asked it to make? You can always ask it to make its own connections, or you might have something specific in mind. If you are a classroom teacher who has a particular style, or you might have sort of some quite quirky things in your classroom, you might, if you've got something quirky in your classroom that's very much you, you might want to attach that to some learning. And it doesn't have to be AI. One of the best things I ever saw was knowing that when students step in to do their final exams, students, of course, end up doing these exams in places like sports halls, places where they're not used to doing learning in. They're completely out of context. And the teacher took the students, his English teacher, took the students in and he said, right, when you are thinking about your writing about your novel, your Dickens novel, Great Expectations, he said, I want you to look around the room, the sports hall, and I want you to look at the basketball hoop. I want you to look at the net. And I want you to think that net is an image of Pip's dreams falling through the nets once he realizes he's actually being funded by a convict. And then I want you to look at the parallel bars. And I want you to think about the way in which stratification of society in Victorian London at the time. So basically, he codified all of the thematic imagery within the novel into physical things in the sports hall, so that when the students got there, they could just look around, and they could remember all the different aspects to fit in into their writing. So all we're doing here is just being a bit savvy with the way in which the brain works. The brain is very good at taking things which are unusual and remembering them. And I think this is what we're trying to do. This is what AI does particularly well, is it can make those connections in a heartbeat that we would otherwise take days to come up with. You can even ask it to put learning, if you use like an AI like Suno, you can ask it to put learning to a piece of music so you can remember it that way as well. But the more we dual code, the more we take different points of reception of information, whether it's images, sound, and text, the way we combine them together, we've got a much better chance of the brain remembering that. Thank you. So before we go, if you want to put any thoughts into the chat, please do. But before we go today, just a few takeaways about what we've been looking at. We've been thinking about how we build student autonomy, and what we're actually doing is trying to say, well, hopefully we've tried to build the student autonomy so that students can use the AI in the effective way, so that they can get unstuck, so they can build their own goals, so they can assess their own work, and so they can be very much self-sufficient in their learning. But to do that, we need to think of three things. Teachers need to teach learning as a discrete skill. They need to say to the learners, this is how you learn, this is your role, so that they know how to leverage AI properly. That means teachers need to be metacognitive. They need to understand how you think about your own thinking. And then teachers need to agree how students should be using it and when. So it's not just a case of go forth and use AI, but what are the breaks? What are the barriers? What is the guidance? Where are the rails? Where are we trying to help students to understand when it's good and when it's not? But what we are teaching students here to do is to make sure that they're not seeing it as just a way to get work done for them, but to get work done with them. That's the main point of this. And before we sort of lead out, just a little bit of a plug, really. As I said, we're Learning Designer Pro, and we are about technology, teachers, and techniques. We're very much about what happens in the classroom. We do have lots of courses. We've got lots of things, extensions of things like this webinar, but we're very much interested in giving teachers accreditation and recognition for what they've done. So we do have pathways to certification as well, whether you're interested in engagement, accessibility, collaboration, or inclusivity, whatever it is you're trying to achieve in the classroom, there are some routes, professional development routes, that you may want to take. If you want to find out a little bit more, I won't go on about it, but just do please get in touch with us, and we will see, if there's anything that we can help you out with. And finally, you've got the resource handout that Dave's provided with you in the chat. If you want to book any Learning Designer Pro sessions for your school or district, do please contact us on that email. Some of the courses that we offer that we've sort of referred to bits of are in the right-hand side there. And if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about Universal Design for Learning framework, I've also put in a link there as well. So if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about that pedagogical framework, do please go along. Anyway, I hope you've learned a couple of things to take away. I hope there's at least one or two things to take away there. I'm just going to look at Donna's chat here. We've got Donna said, compare characters of Les Miserables to sports at the Summer Olympics. Inspector Javert, with his relentless pursuit of justice, reminiscent of marathon runner, pretty good. I love that. Thank you. Yeah, I just think this part of the AI side of things is just absolutely wonderful. It's so creative, and can really help us with our own resources too. And it's been wonderful to meet you all, and I hope to connect with you on social channels, or one day maybe even in person. So thank you so much.
And Phil, thanks for all the work you put into putting together this thoughtful presentation. It was awesome.
No, thanks so much, Dave. Yeah, thank you.